And here we are once again, everyone. It is the Spoiler Room. Thank you for joining us, coming down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping. Well, in this case, I'm twisting the cap off of my favorite drink. And joining us tonight as we discuss movie spoilers and closing out our one night in Bangkok with, yes, a movie I know that doesn't actually take place in Bangkok. It takes place in a town outside of Bangkok, but 12 days of the shooting footage was done in Bangkok. For all of you technical folks out there who want to jump on me for that, which if you do want to jump on me, that's fine. Buy me dinner first. But anyway, that's beside the point. Here we are once again, my friends. And tonight I have a couple of friends with me to discuss The Big Boss. Yes, The Big Boss from 1971. And with me tonight, first off, he's back with us again. He's starting to become a regular here. We are welcoming back Mr. Michael Vyers. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. There was a period of time where I was pretty consistently coming on, and then I just kind of fell off, and now I'm trying to make it up to y'all again and start coming on again.
Well, we appreciate you being here, sir, to talk this fun, early Bruce Lee film, which I'm going to be very interested to hear your thoughts on this. And with us as well, the man who keeps coming back for more as well is none other than Mr. Ian Simmons. How are you doing, Ian?
I'm doing great. The Big Boss is fun, even with that ending.
Yeah, wow, just gonna go straight into
he just cut right to the chase there. Fine, give the synopsis, Ian, of The Big Boss.
Hey, I didn't sign up for this.
No, that's what you get for jumping on that. That's fine.
I jumped on the synopsis grenade. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna go to IMDb and see how accurate this is.
Good luck with that.
I checked. It's bare bones, but it's the story.
It is the story.
A young man, sworn to an oath of nonviolence, works with his cousins in an ice factory where they mysteriously begin to disappear. It almost sounds
the movie.
Well, I was gonna say it almost sounds like the young man also starts to disappear.
Right.
Like everyone's mysteriously
like Back to the Future.
Well, it's not wrong because at one point one of the characters is just who we believe to be the lead character just kind of disappears, and Bruce Lee becomes the lead character.
Yes, and I love that. Yeah, man, this movie was nuts. This is the second Bruce Lee film I've ever seen.
Ooh.
And I'd seen the first one, Enter the Dragon, like 2 months ago. So yeah, I'd never experienced the majesty and magic of Bruce Lee. Oh, so good.
So much fun. Yes, 1971 is this film came out, and then it was re-released in the US, I believe, under Fists of Fury, but do not confuse it with the other movie, Fist of Fury, which he also plays a character named Chang. I think it's meant to be a sequel to Fists of Fury, which is what we're talking about, the Big Boss. It's hard to say with those US releases.
Who knows?
Does the sequel also involve like smuggling dope in blocks of ice? Because it'd be really weird if we ended up talking about like both movies tonight inadvertently.
No, the other one is about Chang. Bruce Lee plays the character Chang, who goes to marry a sweetheart, and his master is killed apparently, and so then he goes on a thing of revenge. I believe it's been a long time since I've seen Fists of Fury. I can honestly say, unfortunately, I've not actually seen The Big Boss, which was why I was excited.
This is a first watch for me too. Like I've seen some of his other movies. I've seen Game of Death. I've seen Way of the Dragon. I've seen Enter the Dragon. But it was this and Fists of Fury that I've not seen yet.
Yeah, so I had not seen this one. This is not his first film, but I think this was one of the first ones where they introduced him to the U.S.
I think it might. So I think how it works, it's not Bruce Lee's first film, but it might be the first Bruce Lee film, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because he was a child actor,
right?
But he went under a different name. He was in like 30 or 40 movies before this.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
he
I
was
didn't know
acting
he was
since he was a kid. Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then he went to the United States, was trying to make a name for himself there. Came up with the
Then
idea for the TV show Kung Fu. They ripped it off. He was in, and they did it without him. He was in the Green Hornet, and when he came back home to China, to help his mom, I think like move to the United States. He was like a big star. He's like, why? But he was the local boy that was on American TV. So
Yeah, so this is an interesting movie because yeah, this was, I think you're right, the one where the first one where his name is the biggest one on the marquee, where he's the headliner
yeah.
basically on it. And yeah, what's your impression of this, Mike? Since this was your first view, what your initial feelings with it? Then we'll dive deeper into it.
Oh, I'm torn. I'm torn because the things that I really liked about this movie, I really liked, but I just kind of felt middle of the road on it through a good portion of the film. But then that last like 20 to 30 minutes completely just won me over.
Yeah,
That's the best way I can describe how I felt, and part of it might have been, because I watched the dubbed version, and
yeah, that's right.
I watched a lot of kung fu movies growing up with the dubbed versions.
Mhm.
But just out of curiosity, I went back in a couple seasons and rewatched them with the subtitle version, and it's a completely different movie.
Is it really?
The music is completely different,
Mhm.
equally weird, but different. And there's just more subtlety to it, and just being
Mhm.
able to hear Bruce Lee actually act and not what sounds like the cast of the Brady Bunch doing it for him. I feel like I felt kind of middle of the road about it on my first watch,
Mhm.
but I feel like I'm gonna at some point watch it with the subtitle version, and I think I'm gonna enjoy it a lot more.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then I just like I have thoughts about things that were done in this movie. I talked about it earlier about like the lead character change, which was done
Mhm.
intentionally, and things like that. But I feel like some of the things that weren't working for me were, I think, me reacting poorly to a poor dub.
Yeah, it could be. It could very well be. Yeah, I tried to find online, but the only copy that I could find on streaming offhand was the Amazon
Yeah,
one, which was dubbed. And I think Freevee or whatever, or Tubi had it, but it was the same version. It
yeah,
was
yeah.
the dubbed version, and I
The
really
the
like.
Criterion version has like the
Mhm.
original Cantonese language track.
Oh,
It was,
nice.
like,
Yeah,
so I was watching with my wife, and she was drawing, so she wanted to be able to focus, like
right.
you listen to the movie while drawing. So I was like, yeah, I'll watch it dubbed. I've watched a
Sure.
lot of kung fu movies dubbed.
Yeah, I've watched some anime dubbed, and let me tell you, sometimes the dubbing, and then you have the subtitles, which would not match the dubbing at all, which makes you wonder what is this about. There's been some animes like that, so the dubbing with this, it made me wonder, how different it was versus the original, because I do try to watch it with the original and then subtitles as well, because you tend to get more. At least you get the performances, but you also seem to get more of the accurate story versus whatever they translated, especially these early ones. Because these early ones, they just grabbed, the distributor just grabbed whatever. It goes, hey, you want to play as Bruce Lee? What? I'll pay you for 3 days work. Okay. And here,
Yeah,
read it.
yeah, and now like dubbing, they take more care into,
Yeah.
because there's
Mhm.
same thing with anime. Like there's big money in it now.
Being accurate for sure.
And
Yeah.
being accurate and getting better performers and shit. But like once upon a time, they didn't care. Just fuck,
Mm-mm.
get it into theaters.
No, that's why I love the dub version. I think it's the only version out there. There might be others. I've got 2 or 3 different DVD copies of Return to the 36th Chamber, one of my all-time favorite of all time martial arts films. And at the end, spoiler room, folks, very old film. Check it out though. At the end, as he's fighting the main boss in that movie, he goes, he starts fighting the guy, and he starts telling him how much of his skill he's using to fight the boss. So he's first like, "Oh, I'll use 30%," and then the guy talks just like that. Whoever they have the dubbing, and they go, "And now I'll use 50%," and they fight for a while that, and then he goes, and now the full 90%. And I'm it's a beautiful dub, and I love it. And I've used that line so many times throughout
Now the
my
full
life.
90%.
I've used that in my life so many times. I just go, and now the full 90%. Because I'm sitting here going, I'm the dude in the booth, recording. And I'm like, wait, did you not think, so watching
No,
the dub
he was too busy sitting there counting his money.
yeah, so watching the dub of the Big Boss, I figured it was going to be altered a little bit, but there's also some editing cuts, which we'll get into a little while, that made me like, wait, where'd that character go? But first, Ian, I want to get your initial feelings from this first watch of the Big Boss.
I mean, I loved it.
Yeah.
I bought it. I mean, the thing is, like, on Amazon, it was one of those things where you can rent it for $4 or you can
Or
buy it for $5. I'm like,
Might as well.
That's what I
Right.
did. Yeah, that's what I did too. I did the exact same thing. I was like, I'll buy it. Well, fuck it. Yeah.
right. And I really am glad that I did, because I think I like this movie. I've only seen it once. I only saw Enter the Dragon once, but I think I like this movie better than I like Enter the Dragon. I love Enter the Dragon. I like the simplicity of this. I like the fact that, particularly in those last 20 minutes that you were mentioning, Michael, and it made me think back to the rest of the film. This is a horror movie. It's a horror martial arts movie, down to the score, which, like, it opens with a really bombastic score, but then as it kind of trails off and the movie starts, it gets really kind of sinister and dark. A lot of the shots were following the characters, particularly towards the end. It looks like Friday the 13th Part 3, down to the barn, down to like the way that we're stalking certain characters as they're moving through the environment, down to, again, this is a spoiler, you've got a character walking into these different houses that look kind of like cabins and just finding piles of people who've been horribly murdered.
Including a kid.
Gory movie.
Including a kid. Yeah, I was not. I thought this was going to be more in the vein of Enter the Dragon, except it's going to take place in this kind of a small village rather than a remote, like, fantasy island or whatever of assassins. But I mean, there's tons of nudity and like hardcore, like, violence and, some really grisly stuff here. And it was a great surprise. But on top of that, yeah, I understand the dubbing and stuff. And yes, it's always nice to be able to get the original language and the original interpretation. I don't know that the movie is that deep that you're going to get like, oh, this is a dramatic change in the story. But by the time the movie was over, I'd kind of compartmentalized the dubbing, because I was so wrapped up in Bruce Lee's performance, because he's such an expressive actor, not just when he's flipping around and posing, but he's just, I mean, Jesus, I wish that guy and Brandon Lee, if they had been just father and son duo living for the next 50 years, I think they would have had some really, really magical movies. In the future.
I completely agree. And one thing I will say is, like I said, there was parts in the middle that was just kind of losing me, and I don't necessarily expect to watch the subtitle version and it's gonna like drastically change the story. I just what I was missing is, like you said, even with a bad dub, Bruce Lee, there's something about him in this movie. But when he's doing something subtle, the cast of the Brady Bunch is going up to like, they're using full 90% in their performance. And I was like, I like when he's doing these subtle things, I want the movie to be subtle. But I will say, like, those last 20 minutes and even that ending, like after the movie finished, was like, fuck, I kind of want to rewatch this already. There's just something about this movie that, even though, like I said, parts of it weren't working. And when I say middle of the road, it's more so because I'm trying to process how I feel about it. I definitely didn't dislike the movie. I'm just trying to like wrap my mind around what I had just seen, because it's simultaneously a very Bruce Lee movie and also not a very Bruce Lee movie.
Well, I mean, I'm going to keep harping on that slasher thing, because I understand.
That's an interesting perspective, Ian.
Well, thank you. But I think the next time I watch it, because I know it's First of all, it's an hour and 40 minutes, which I think is probably 10 minutes too long because it was kind of intimidating in that middle section where characters are disappearing and there's a lot of conversations. You're like, yes, I get it. Now, this is the next group that's going to go up and try and like find out what's going to go on and they're going to be dispatched or whatever. That is also very slasher movie because people are always pairing off and like, oh, we're going to go investigate that spooky noise. Except in this movie, it's no, we're going to go and talk to the foreman or the manager who's going to talk to the big boss because we think something fishy is going on. But yeah, it does get a little bit repetitive in the middle. And I'm sorry, as much as I love the Cheng character in this movie and Bruce Lee, I do wonder exactly, and I know there is a catalyst for it, but his whole thing is like his uncle or whoever dropped him off in the village is like, no, remember, you got to have your oath to not fight anybody. You're going to be, Mr. Passive resistance or whatever. But he watches people get like horribly beaten up and nearly killed right in front of him.
I know. He watched his like female cousin getting assaulted. He looks at his necklace. He's like, I can't do it.
Yeah,
right. That circular jade necklace, and it's not until the necklace gets like, I think, inadvertently taken off of him and then snapped in two during a fight. Is like, oh, you've unleashed the beast. I'm like, yeah, thanks for jumping in now, buddy.
Yeah, he's just kind of standing there, and the workers getting their ass kicked, and his cousins and he's like, and then someone came up to him, and he's like, no, but yeah, then they pulled he did let it slip once. He helped his buddy once, and his uncle who just disappeared. I loved it. It's like, folks, Hollywood isn't the only people who just suddenly a character will drop out and they'll draw a line of you had their uncle who like you were saying before, Ian, was going to go into and he put up a little bit of a fight or what, a protest to how his boys were being treated, and you don't really see him for a while, but everybody still acts like he's around. Nobody really talks about it. And then 5 minutes later, after he hasn't been on screen for like 5 or 10 minutes, they're like, oh, well, Uncle Cho's gone. And I'm like, oh, now you notice. I'm like, where the heck you guys been? He's been gone for a while.
Well, there were like 7 people living in this house, so it's a lot to keep track of. I think like 7 adults. Yeah, there's like the little kid and Chow Mei. And I hate to say it, but like every time they said her name, I kept inserting Chow Mein.
Yeah,
me and my wife had to go look it up because it's like we're like, is this the character's name or did the American dub people choose this?
Right.
And we looked it up and it's like, oh, it's Chow Mei. Okay, that makes it better at least.
I mean, she was a saucy dish, but no, that's not her name.
Oh, and she's such an her relationship with Bruce Lee's character in this movie is very strange. My favorite part between the two of them is after he saves her, saves her just by being there, I guess, down by the river, or when she's cleaning her clothes, and then she runs into his arms and they're just standing there, and then they just kind of like pull apart and be like, they're just like looking around like we shouldn't have done that. It was the funniest thing. I don't know what they're going for there, but it just felt very much like the Brady Bunch movie. I keep bringing up the Brady Bunch, and like Greg and Marsha not supposed to be like into each other, like that storyline in the Brady Bunch movie.
See, I interpreted it as that like at that point in the screenplay, they were related, and then like later they changed it to be a love interest.
Well, yeah,
and they just never went back and fixed it.
When Bruce Lee's character gets drunk, when he gets drunk, he starts picturing his cousin.
Yeah, he pictures his cousin over the escort that the boss man got him, because eventually, to kind of calm Chang down, Bruce Lee's character, the manager makes him the foreman. He's like, oh, he comes to him to protest. He's like, you know what? You're the foreman now. There you go. And, it's like, oh, okay. And then they invite him to dinner. And then, the boss, the manager brings in the escorts, and he pictures, he apparently doesn't drink until tonight, until this dinner, to where he drinks, to where then he's like breaking like a bundle of like 10 bamboo shoots or whatever. They got these 10 bamboo shoots. He's like, hold still. Whack. And I'm just looking at that going, man, I don't want to be around if Bruce was drunk because you tick him off or something, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you've got a fist through your chest because he's like.
So, Ian, you mentioned how this movie kind of reminded you of a slasher film. For me, as I was watching it, it reminded me of the kung fu version of Norma Ray. Because I just watched that movie podcast, and Norma Ray, for those of you who haven't seen it, is about a woman who works in deplorable conditions in a textile factory who gets a group of people together to create a union, and it reminded me so much of that. Granted, Bruce Lee's character didn't create a union, but like there's the whole like workers revolting. They even have the subplot of in Norma Ray when she's complaining too much, they give her a promotion. It's like, oh, they do the same thing to Bruce Lee in this movie. This is the Kung Fu Norma Ray.
The Kung Fu Norma Ray.
Whatever the next home video release is of this, they need to have your quote on the box. This is the Kung Fu Norma Ray. But no,
oh god, that'd be I could retire happy at that point.
The Norma Ray of Kung Fu films.
Was Norma Ray later in the 70s?
Yeah, it was like 79.
Yeah.
Was that based on? I can't remember. Was that based on a true story, or was that just?
Yes, it's based loosely on the story of Crystal Lee Sutton, who helped create a union in a small Texas town.
Yeah, that was.
So I wonder if someone was inspired. They had watched The Big Boss and thought, "Man, this is amazing." Wait, there's a true story version. Let's make a movie. And then
Martin Ritz sitting around like, "Man, what do I follow up HUD with? Oh, let's do the female Big Boss with no kung fu."
Now I want to see Sally Field do some martial arts though. That's what I want to see because that's who it was, right? Who played Norma Ray?
Yeah.
Man, I want to see her do some serious martial arts. Like,
hey, the flying nunchucks.
Oh,
flying
nunchucks. Now I want to see that.
Oh, that's a deep pull that not everyone in this not everyone in this audience is gonna get, but I love that.
I love that too. What I love is is if you noticed. So you could tell who the bad guys were versus your workers. Your workers either could not button their shirt or they wore like
the hottest ice factory ever.
Well, or they wore kind of like those specific garments. I don't know if they were like meant to be peasant clothes or what, but the button down, the traditional kind of
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I forgot the name of it. I do apologize, everyone. But their garb is all the same, especially when they go see the boss versus the boss, and all his thugs are dressed like Westerners. So they got blue jeans, they got like the fly collar, the collar on the one son, his shirt at one point, he looked like he could take off. Because the thing was like this big around his button, but they're in jeans. They're dressed more like Westerners a bit, whereas the workers were dressed more. I think it felt more not as flamboyant in dress. They were because they were a different class than the manager and the drug runners who were super rich. And I just thought it was interesting that they even had that in the wardrobe, so you knew who was the bad guy and who were the good guys.
Yeah, I mean, the clothes are its own character in this movie. I mean, the son, he spent half the movie, I feel like, wearing this like really crazy pink shirt and white pants. It was like pre-Miami Vice or something by about a decade and a half. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Well, all of them, all the thugs, all the foot soldiers for the big boss all wore like pastel colors, and that they all wore like bright colors and that. But even the street gang who first meets up with Chang, I mean, guy is literally from town. He comes to this village. They go visit this stand to get some shaved ice, and these gangster guys, this gang of guys come up and start harassing her. And even them, they're dressed totally different than Chang and his uncle and then their buddy, because they end up stealing rice patty?
Rice balls.
Grace balls from the kid who will end up, spoiler, later dead.
Oh,
Yeah. Uh, and so then Chang's cousin shows up, like you said, Ian, the guy who you think is going to be the main character, and he starts cleaning house with the three. He's just like,
yeah,
and then
that's Sue.
Sue, yeah,
And you know, it's what I love about this movie is, yeah, the guy that you think is going to be the star. He's about, I think, as charismatic and someone that I want to watch on screen as Bruce Lee. And I thought that was
Mhm.
going to be pretty hard to do. But when he's dispatched, I was like, oh, I really felt it. Like, especially because he goes out in a pretty, heroic and dramatic fashion. Him and one of his, I think one of the other cousins fighting like 16 guys
Yeah,
inside the big boss's compound. And they, the bad guys cheat, of course, because they're bringing out all these heavy weapons, and these guys just have their martial arts skills. But yeah, I really felt that when he left, and I believed that Cheng felt his absence. Um, so yeah, this movie has two like brilliant, like star wattage leads in it, only one of whom makes it to the
And
end. And oh my God, what happens to him at the end?
yeah, and
It's a bummer.
there's a story behind that if you're interested.
yeah.
So
Yes.
James Tien, who played Bruce Lee's cousin, I'm trying to think of, I don't remember his character name at the
It
moment.
was
I want to
Sue.
say
Sue,
Sue. Okay.
yeah.
There's a boy named Sue.
Yeah, he was a legitimate star in Hong Kong cinema at the time. And Bruce Lee came into this film, so they were already going to make this movie. So they didn't develop this for Bruce Lee. They're already going to do this movie, and they knew that Bruce Lee was a kind of a big star or becoming a big star in the United States. Like, well, let's put him in this movie too. But they weren't too sure how he was going to do in this movie. So they had this idea that pretty much they knew they were going to kill off one of the characters in this movie, and whoever had the best screen presence was going to be who was going to end up being the character. So they didn't know who they were going to kill off in this movie. And I know Bruce Lee was pissing off a lot of the crew member, or a lot of the people in charge, because in Hong Kong cinema, the fight scenes all kind of are rooted from like the Chinese ballet, and that's kind of like where the root of their martial arts in terms of storytelling comes from. And that's why, like, especially if you notice, the fight scenes change as the movie goes on, and at the beginning they're kind of long and they're drawn out and they're a little more showy, and then once Bruce Lee becomes the character, it's main character, they're over a lot faster. And everyone was pissed off at Bruce Lee because he doesn't do that type of flowy, longer fight scenes. He wants to get his stuff over fast because it's more it's more realistic.
Right.
But the producer of this film wanted Bruce Lee so much that they actually fired the first director because he was fighting him so bad. And so that's actually when Bruce Lee takes over, the style of the fight scenes change. So at any point, if Bruce Lee would have just been a less than good actor, James Tien would have been the one who made it to the end of the movie.
Wow.
I'm glad that behind the scenes drama worked out, because I feel like that's it's the perfect balance. I also like that. I'm jumping way ahead here, but that
Go ahead.
penultimate confrontation where he's fighting all the people in the barn,
Yeah.
and then they go outside. There's a scene, I rewound it to watch it because I couldn't believe that I was seeing what I was seeing, but he punches a guy through the barn door, and it makes that Warner Brothers
Yes!
cartoon
Yes!
cutout shape in the
Yes!
wall. I'm
Yes.
like, this is not a comedy, but it's using sort of the language of that comedy to draw attention to how cool and how crazy that punch is of him putting that guy through the barn wall. It's instantly one of my most memorable scenes in a movie, and I just watched it this morning.
Oh, I love that. I the minute I like, you see him punch him, and then they cut to a wide shot, and he's walking up to fight some more guys. Yeah, you see the silhouette in the background. You don't see it right away when he first punches him. You see it in the background as he's walking away.
It's such a subtle payoff.
It
With
is.
how unsubtle that is,
Yeah.
they don't draw a lot of attention to it, and that's what makes it so fucking great.
It's wonderful. Yeah. A couple of other trivia tidbits that they had from IMDb, if you folks will indulge me. Apparently, the Thai brothel, which is where our man Chen wakes up after he is drunk, and he's with the prostitute. So apparently, it was an actual functioning brothel.
All right.
That a Thai brothel that they actually filmed in. The extras in all the scenes except for Malalina's character were actual prostitutes who were paid by Golden Harvest than they would normally receive in a day by their clients, so that they could appear in the film. So only the actress and Bruce Lee were the paid actors, and everybody else actually worked at that brothel, which was an actual brothel.
Wow.
And I remember just being surprised, like, that there was so much nudity in this movie.
Yeah,
Because,
that
like,
surprised
I
me.
don't associate that with Bruce Lee, and
Mhm.
especially because, like, they just didn't usually show that type of stuff in Hong Kong cinema.
Well, just martial arts films in general, you
Yeah.
don't normally see a lot of, unlike Italian horror, where if you don't see it, you're surprised. In 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 the martial arts movies, you're very surprised if you do see it. If you do see it, it's usually brief and not necessarily in a love scene, which you actually get a love scene here, which she our man Chang's passed out cold, right? But she's all like, "Oh damn, I've got Bruce Lee in my bed." He's all like chiseled in it. She's like, "Well, I don't care if he is passed out." So she just whips the clothes off and goes, "Okay, I'm gonna, we're gonna lay in bed here." And then of course they do the fade out.
The classy fade out.
The classy fade out. Yes.
Help me out here, something. Maybe I think I had like a hangover from Enter the Dragon, where Bruce Lee played a guy who was recruited by the government. He was like an undercover agent to go to this island to discover and break up this crime ring.
Mhm.
When Cheng gets promoted to foreman, and then when he's doing the whole like dinner and getting drunk thing, there's a part of me who was thinking that he was doing that to infiltrate the big boss's business. But from the interpretation I'm getting from you guys, and I think it's making more and more sense, he was just kind of like, yeah, the country bumpkin essentially guys like, oh, cool, I got a promotion. Whereas when I was watching it this morning, I thought he got that promotion a little bit too quickly and he seemed a little bit too eager. I thought he was doing that so he could like find out who the big boss is, like maybe get into his house, find out if he knows where these other people are, but I guess not, huh?
No, I never actually took it like that. I just took it that he was in over his head. He didn't know who, he had a fully pure intentions of trying to figure out what's happening to his buddies, and he's taking the manager's word that the boss is going to go to the cops, which boss ain't going to go to the fucking cop. But but I think he was trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and just trying to grow along with this, not realizing what he's got himself into until it was too late.
I agree with that interpretation, and for
Mhm.
that reason, I kind of think, and I know I've been gushing over Bruce Lee, I feel like Bruce Lee is wrong to play that kind of character because I look at him just the way that he carries himself throughout the film, even when he's not talking and he's just like you can see the thinking. I feel like I'm watching a really intelligent guy who's like 6 steps ahead of anybody he's dealing with. So
Right.
this idea of him being like naive or in like
it-
I can't imagine a world where a Bruce Lee character is quote unquote in over his head or not aware of what's going on.
And well, I imagine it could also be it could be a just difference, like a creative difference as well. Because like it almost feels like he's playing in his head one character that's different than the character that he was written to play.
Yeah.
And then actually speaking of creative differences, I don't know if you can see this comment, Mark, but
Yep. Ross
yeah.
put in the comment. I was just going to bring it up. Yeah. Ross Bigley, who thank you for tuning in live. Thank you tuning in all our live viewers. But Ross Bigley, so glad you could join us and appreciate the comment. He says the hole in the wall punch was part of a creative difference Lee had with the director. He hated it, and Lee was asserting himself more, and that's why it's only seen in the wide shot. The film was so cheaply made, they couldn't really cut it out with more coverage. So
And I've also been thinking since I saw that and then knowing all the drama behind the scenes, if some of these scenes that Bruce Lee's in, if maybe they were intended for the other character. Because remember, like I said earlier, like they didn't know which character they were going to kill off in this movie. So I'm almost wondering if they're maybe like swapping scenes and they didn't really have a clear image for either character. Bruce Lee is clearly creating a persona, even if that persona is opposite from the character he's supposed to be playing. Whether or not it's a good, well, obviously it worked because he became a huge fucking star, but it very much feels like, based on what I know about Bruce Lee and know about the making of this movie, that he's not afraid to say when he thinks something is stupid. He got fucked around so much in Hollywood. He's trying to have some iota of control.
Listening to this just makes me love this movie even more. Yeah, let me ask you a question, Michael. Do you have a bit of Bruce Lee knowledge here? Is there like a definitive like biography or like because I'm loving Bruce Lee and I want to know more about his life. I mean, I was knocked out by the scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Brad Pitt kicked Bruce Lee's ass. I understand there was some controversy over that. I'm starting to get offended for some reason.
Well,
Because I'm like, I don't think that would happen, even if it was like a fantasy sequence or whatever. But yeah, like, is there a definitive source for like a story of Bruce Lee's life?
it's hard to say because I have seen so many documentaries about him over the years, because I have bought in so many versions of his movies, and almost all of them come with documentaries unless you get the new version of Enter the Dragon that Warner Brothers just put out. But if you could find any of the Enter the Dragon Blu-rays, there's usually some good documentaries about him. I'm trying to find some of the names right now. Yeah, I remember there being a couple of good ones on there, but then also I not that I'm necessarily shilling for the Criterion collection, but if it's still available, I would highly recommend the Criterion collection of Bruce Lee films they did, because each film has special features, and that's actually where I learned some of what I'm talking about today. It actually has a great interview with Gene LaBelle, who is a former professional wrestler and martial arts expert who trained with Bruce Lee, who has a similar story to what happened to Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Of like, he tells a story about like Bruce Lee trying to show him a couple things, and Gene LaBelle just picking Bruce Lee up, and Bruce Lee saying like, put me down or I'll kick your ass, and him saying, well, if I put you down, you're gonna kick my ass. And there's a lot of great, each film has this, a lot like Bruce Lee historians on it. And there's actually a great documentary on there about Bruceploitation as well. So what I would say to do is pick up the Enter the Dragon Blu-ray if you can find it. It's probably readily available for like $10, or just pick up the Criterion collection and get some of those special features, because I've always found him to be a fascinating figure, and I will just watch anything I can find on him.
And you see some of the stories, and especially when Once Upon a Time from Hollywood came out about that scene with Bruce Lee, and you sit there, and always makes me wonder with stories like this, where they were saying, no, that's not how he was, and then other people saying, well, kind of. I'm like, there's usually a middle of the road. So I always feel like there's maybe a little truth with the story to where he is on both sides. I mean, if you look at him as a martial artist and as an artist in general, you could tell, and he was a perfectionist. I mean, it's just like Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire on camera, whatever, very charismatic, smiley guy or whatever. Apparently, when it came to his dance choreography, he was a bastard to people. Like, they had to get it like right on, for certain things. And I imagine maybe that is the way it was with Bruce Lee, at least with like his fighting and that maybe he may have been more stern with people than what people would like, and it's just because of the type of artist he he was.
and it's also
know.
hard to say too. By the way, I found the name of the documentary I was thinking of. It's called A Warrior's Journey. That's on the Enter the Dragon Blu-ray. But it's hard to say for sure because like I imagine he had different personas around different people. Like, I guess I'll put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised if he had an ego about himself. I don't know if he did. But at the same time, I can also see him being very humble. Unfortunately, we don't know what he was truly like. We only have the reflections of other people. And while that can be very telling, the way that he is, say, in front of his students, like Steve McQueen and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, might be very different than he is with his wife behind closed doors.
Right.
So I don't know what he's like, but I think that's what makes him so fascinating is that there are so many contradictory opinions about what he was like.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty much everything says he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Well,
and the thing is, you look at a movie like The Big Boss, and you see the character he's playing in that, and what he's doing, is just amazing. The fight scenes in that he's doing and the talent that's there, you're just drawn to his personality. And to have a big personality like that, I think, may come with either a certain attitude or whatnot that may be off-putting to people, some people, just the way he is. But on screen, I
also imagine some of that has to be like he's, the whole point of his fighting style that he helped develop, Jeet Kune Do, was fighting at its purest form and to cut out all the extra stuff that's not needed. And you can even see that in the way he choreographs his fight scenes. The way that James Tien fights with a lot of posturing, and usually it's like one person after another all jumping in, and it's very dance-like, whereas Bruce Lee, he only has, a couple kicks and punches, but he finishes his stuff fast. He was trying to figure out how to do these fight scenes and fighting in general and just cut it down to brass tacks.
Mm-hmm.
What do you need?
Well, when he's fighting the big boss at the end, I mean, forget about the finishing move, which is one of the most spectacular bits I've ever seen with the
kick the knife.
The knife flies into the air. He kicks it, and it goes and rockets right into the guy's stomach. And they did he do like was he ripping, like he was digging his claws into the guy's chest or something?
Yeah,
it looked
his
like
fingers,
the ultimate titty twister.
Yeah, he did. His fingers, because he didn't have a weapon, hence your fist of fury. He took his fist and he was, and he just shoved his fingers into his lungs, basically.
Right. And you saw the blood coming out of the back and everything. Yeah. But in the fighting, as they were kind of sparring with each other, I love that some of the wide shots where they're sort of like sussing each other out, and they like make a couple of quick strides forward and then back, almost like you imagine scorpions fighting or dogs when they're not quite ready to pounce. But yeah, there was something very like primal in the way that they were doing it, and I felt like they were trying to kill each other, but I didn't feel like I was watching, as you put it, Michael, something like a ballet. I thought I was watching a couple of very well trained artistic scrappers.
Yeah, and it's what I love about the way that Bruce Lee composes his fight sequences is, like I said, most of the kung fu movies you see, or the way, and it's not to say that it's bad, it's just a different way of doing it.
Right.
There's a lot of back and forth and a lot of just excess movement, which can be fun. It can be exciting. It can be all those things. Don't get me wrong. But like what I love so much about that final fight between Bruce Lee and the Big Boss is it's a lot of like just kind of staring each other down. It's trying to figure out what is it. It's like playing mental chess. It's like, what is this person going to do? If they do this, can I do this? And they have to decide split second. It's not a lot of flips and moving. And it's like, okay, I'm only going to have one or two shots and they have to count. So I need to kind of get an idea of what they're like, sizing each other up. And it's like watching a duel in a Western. Like, who's going to move first and who's going to get the upper hand?
Yeah.
It reminded me far more his fight scenes, especially in this one with the big boss, more like a samurai fight than the normal martial arts flair fight that you
Yeah.
see. Like you're saying, one of my favorite fights of all time, and it doesn't last long at all, and I'll invoke it, is Seven Samurai. When you're first introduced to I forgot his name offhand, the quiet one, the quiet assassin, though, where they come upon him dueling with another guy, and it's not flashy. All it is they're standing in a field, the two of them with their swords raised, and then one would change position and the another one would change his position, and one would move his foot and the other way. They hadn't touched each other. There's a space in front of them, but it was like you were saying, Mike, the mental chess going on of, okay, he's in this position. What kind of moves is he going to do? And you do kind of get that here. Like Big Boss comes out and he surprised him with the knives at first. So then, Chang changes his approach to how he's fighting the Big Boss when the knives come out. He changes it up, and he's more calculated, and he's more, And then I was surprised at how it ended too, because I mean I love the kick. I love the kick knife. I was like, how are they going to end this? How are they kick knife and then figured like, and I'm like, okay, didn't expect that. but then what you don't expect as well is the police show up.
Yeah.
And they arrest the good guy. Because Chow Mei went to get the cops because she escaped, because she was initially going to be given to the boss for God knows what. And she escapes and gets the cops, and the cops come and arrest Chang. And I'm like, wait.
Well, you're not wrong, but I read that ending a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine they took him into custody because they have to like figure out what the fuck happened here. You just murdered someone. But I took that ending as less that he's being arrested, like, and more so he's choosing to go.
Oh,
because he went against this vow that he had.
Right.
To the point that he took another person's life, and things escalated to a point that I don't know if he necessarily felt comfortable with internally. So it's almost like, this is what I deserve. That's the way that I read it. Which is, still you could get arrested, but you can't arrest a dead guy, Mark.
What?
I was honestly, once I saw the way this was going, I was surprised that they didn't just kill him. Because you get the feeling that the local authorities are just in the Big Boss's pocket. I mean, he's got free reign of that entire town. I understand what you're saying, Mike. I got to think about that one, because there's almost this idea of like a greater, almost like a karmic punishment for unleashing the beast. But
I love that you just saying that. I just love that you just keep saying unleashing the beast, because I don't know, it puts a smile on my face.
It's fitting. It's
I know it's 100% fitting. It just makes me giggle.
What makes me giggle, and this is apropos of nothing, but there's something in the universe is trying to tell me something, because this is the third movie I've watched in the last like 3 months that involve like ice manufacturing and ice houses. I watched The Mosquito Coast with Harrison Ford.
Okay.
I watched East of Eden with James Dean. And I watched this movie. And the central like conceit of these is like there's manufacturing of giant ice blocks. I'd never seen that in a movie before, and now I've seen it 3 times in 3 months. What's going on here?
I think it's time for profession change.
Yeah,
you need to go start making some ice.
I'll be a drug kingpin. I don't know. I kept thinking about that scene from Reservoir Dogs where Harvey Keitel is talking to, I don't know, it was Joe or somebody they were talking about diamonds, but there was that phrase he said, I didn't know nobody who could move ice. And I kept thinking about that watching this movie. I don't know.
The ice factory was a surprise. I love how they hid the bodies in the ice too, and you didn't know at first until they went to the ice house, and then it's be careful buying ice from this group at least. And Ross got even some more tidbits of info. our character Chang, Bruce Lee's character, was arrested because in Hong Kong films at the time, censorship guidelines can't have someone who kills not get held accountable.
Oh, interesting.
It was only a couple of years later that those guidelines ended. So, whether or not afterwards, I always love kind of imagining sometimes some of these films, what happens in the, after the credits, or what's happening in this world. Yeah, maybe he does let go, but on screen anyway, last time we see, he's getting arrested, and wow, that's because of censorship. And I think it works though. They work it into the story to where it works, to leave it kind of like, well, wait, is he going to get arrested? Will he confess everything and then let go? I mean, because I imagine once he shows the ice house blocks have drugs in them,
And people.
They'll go, oh,
Well,
yeah, okay, yeah.
But think about it this way, going back to the slasher movie analogy, it's kind of like when the cops show up, to Camp
Yeah.
Crystal Lake after
Yeah.
Jason's gone on a rampage. Imagine if Jason hadn't been killed by a counselor. He was just like there. Like one of the counselors said, hey, there's a whole bunch of dead bodies at the location, and there's one guy left standing. The cops show up, there's bodies everywhere, and there's one guy with blood all over him and wounds. They take him into custody.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I like that he did though. I liked they didn't like do a freeze frame because after he kills the guy, that 70s wonderful 70s freeze frame, like, okay, we're ending it now. That's it. It just ends.
I miss freeze frames, but I got my fill of snap zooms.
Oh yeah. There's snaps.
I love snap zooms, and Mark, when you do eventually get to see my film No Soliciting, I have 3 snap zooms in that movie. Well, 3 zooms. Only one of them's technically a snap zoom, but still, I fucking love them.
Oh, they're great. They're so effective.
For some reason, and there's no reason for this thought process whatsoever, but my brain's just tangenting right now. Where I was thinking, it's like, oh, what would happen to Bruce? Like, what would Bruce Lee be doing? Like, his character be doing in prison? And I was like, oh, he'd probably just be sitting there silent and probably not do anything. But it was like, that would be boring. What if instead it was like Terminator and he just kung fu's the shit out of everyone? Remember the police officer, like the police station scene in the first Terminator?
Yeah,
just
yeah.
imagine that, but with kung fu. His character wouldn't do that, but I've been sitting here thinking, man, that'd be a cool fight scene.
No, but I could easily see the sequel to The Big Boss. And now we're just off on a tangent, folks. I apologize, but this would be fascinating to have Chang. He is arrested, put into jail, and then you have folks who were loyal to the big boss that he killed keep trying to start shit with him in jail. And so now you've got this guy in prison jail to where he's just beating the crap out of people in prison all the time.
Or those
shank him in the shower and you do a kung fu version of Maniac Cop.
There you go. Or those people that who he helped at the ice factory, help him escape, and then he creates like an Apocalypse Now style like cult in the middle of the woods.
They'd be priests. He'd be teaching them the way of
the way of water.
The way of water. It'd be that's the whole En Bach thing. We just taught you how to kill someone in 8 different ways through Mai Tai. Now don't use it. Okay, go off into the world now. Wait, what? We tell you. Yeah, that's like here. It's like, well, I made the promise. I could kick everyone's ass right now and protect everyone, but I made this promise, so I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna chill.
Yeah, it's about restraint.
It's about restraint.
Just because you know how to kill someone with your finger doesn't mean you should.
Well, no, I'm not saying he should go around killing everybody, but I mean, still,
if anyone could do it,
if anyone could do
Mr.
it,
Knife Kick himself.
It'd be Bruce Lee, who I love watching his fights because every move is calculated.
Those fights don't get old, even when sometimes the movie's not necessarily working at all times. As soon as like he starts kicking someone or even just moving, like just the way that he moves his body throughout scenes, I'm like, you're fascinating. You have such a control of like I said, he's not, by the time he does The Big Boss, he's no stranger to acting.
Right.
But he hadn't had the persona at that point. Like, if you were to see this movie and I think it's almost shocking that this is the first Bruce Lee movie
Mm-hmm.
because he's so comfortable as this person
Mm-hmm.
on screen.
I mean, that probably goes back to his expectation for himself, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like maybe he if he didn't understand this was going to be his big crossover movie, maybe he really wanted it, so he wanted to just like put everything out there. Especially if you're saying, as you're saying, Michael, there was all this behind the scenes stuff where he has to just, you know, turn on the charisma, like bring all of his skills to the fore and make turn in a memorable performance. Otherwise, he's gonna end up dying halfway through the picture. Yeah,
Yeah,
all of
and if
that.
that would have happened, you know, we probably wouldn't have. He might have made a couple more movies, but Bruce Lee wouldn't be a superstar.
Well, it also makes me think about like adversity. If this had just been a regular movie and he was brought on to play, you know, the Sue character who didn't make it or whatever, or maybe he was the character that lived. I don't know. I feel like there's all these great Hollywood stories about the thing that the unknown X factor that came in and was like the darkest hour for everybody that they had to overcome in order to make this piece of art. And cinema was kind of forever changed because of the circumstance that no one could have predicted. Had this been an easier shoot or like a conventional shoot, like you're saying, you know, we might not have had Bruce Lee as we know him
Well,
today.
and I think one thing that could be part of it too is he's no stranger to superstardom. Not in the
Right.
fact that he was one, but at the time, to make money in when he was living in America, he was training kung fu to celebrities. Some of the people he trained were Steve McQueen and James Coburn and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, these larger than life personalities. So I'm sure just hanging out with these people who are larger than life, he probably picked some stuff up about like what I need to do
Mm-hmm.
to get on their level. Because I can't imagine you hang out with if you're hanging out with Steve McQueen long enough, you didn't pick something up. There's something wrong because that guy just oozes cool.
He does
Yeah.
just who's cool. There's actually a number of deleted scenes apparently. First off, you're right about the gore.
Unexpected.
I unexpected. When the guys first off the two cousins with the saw in the ice shop. I'm like, they stretch it. I'm like, wait, are they going to? And then I expected them to like cut away like normal, you know, but no, they blood and they chop
Someone
these
had been
guys up.
watching like a Herschel Gordon Lewis movie before they made this. Did
They
they just
did.
get Blood Feast over in Hong Kong at this time?
Right? Color Me Blood Red or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like, wow. I did not expect the way some of these folks died and showed on camera.
Yeah,
I
and it
did
wasn't
not
just like
expect.
for people out there who are watching this and haven't seen the movie yet. It's not just like a little bit of blood coming out their mouth. Like, no,
Mm-mm.
it's no, it's not like Kill Bill geysers of blood, but it's still pretty gory for 1971.
Dude takes a saw to the head. There's a guy who
Yeah.
takes a saw to the head for crying out loud. I mean,
Doesn't the big boss's son like take an axe to the back and then he falls
yeah,
onto it?
yeah, yeah. Or there's the one guy. I think I forgot who it was. I think maybe it wasn't Chang. It was our Sue, I think, maybe, but he headbutts one guy, and then all of a sudden, all this blood just starts coming down the
Yeah.
side of the guy's face. It's like, oh damn.
It's realistic.
I will
How
say,
a headbutt would go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, this is something else I had never seen before, but the final fight between Chang and the big boss's son,
Mhm.
Chang, I just don't know how to describe it except he punch bitch slapped him. Like
Yeah.
it was a punch, but it was also like a
Yeah. But it was
like
yeah.
like he turned his fist into a giant club and just it was amazing.
It was. I did not expect that at all. But yeah, I mean, but with the deleted scenes, there's a lot of more graphic scene, I guess, with the two cousins with the large circular saw is even more graphic than that. There was a longer scene between Sue and Sue Chung featuring a shot of Sue with blood literally squirting out of his head due to a knife attack. They also had a scene apparently that before he goes fighting, he goes back to the brothel. He picks another woman who was in a red sweater, who was actually in this one of the earlier scenes, and they strip down and they complete the transaction, and then he puts all of his money on her belly while she's sleeping, the rest of his money that he has, and he grabs the bag of prawn chips that are on her counter, which is why he has chips when he
I was
comes
wondering
out of
about
the taxi. Apparently is that's where he got those from. And then of course
glorious.
we get, you look at this movie and I know he was he was big and he was in other films, but there are so many things in this film that you end up seeing replicated in other martial arts films going forward after this movie, including the blood tasting. We get the infamous Bruce Lee blood tasting, and I'm just like, oh my god, there it is.
Yeah. He's like he is, like I said earlier, it's like he's playing in his mind a different role than what's
Yeah.
written there, because it feels like he's like, it's almost like this movie is not the best, but it's gonna build to something.
Yeah, I'm
He
gonna
wants
play
the
this
building
character.
blocks
Yeah,
there for whatever comes next.
I'm gonna try this and this. It's like he's almost using it to feel out how he's gonna go forward with some of his approach to
Yeah, it almost feels
latest
like
screen fights and characters.
or almost like I've done it their way enough. I'm gonna try to
Mhm.
sneak in as much as of my shit as I can to see if it works.
Yeah, and I think it does. This is
Yeah.
this is a fun movie. It's crazy. There.
Honestly, talking about it has raised my just like how much I liked it up even more. It's like I said, I've been trying to figure it out this entire time.
It's not a deep film, but it does have a linear story. There are components to it. There is a storyline throughout. It's not as fight heavy as you might think, considering it is a Bruce Lee film. There are fight scenes in here, but yeah, I dig it. And your final thought, Ian, with the Big Boss?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I think for if there are fans of kung fu who don't like horror and fans of horror who don't like kung fu, or think that they don't, this is a great, I think, meeting in the middle, because it's such a strange movie that has all this different like visual language in it, plus these beautiful Bruce Lee fight scenes and that wonderful ending. Whether or not we can figure out what happened after he got taken into custody or let himself get taken into custody, it is a shocking thing, because nowadays conventional film storytelling is, you've got the corrupt guy who's in charge of all the cops, you've got the good guy who goes up against the system, and the cops show up at the end after the big boss is felled and is like, oh yeah, this guy was corrupt and I took care of all these criminals and they were running drugs and all this other stuff. The cops are like, oh, thank you for solving this problem, you're the hero. Like, no, you just wiped out our boss and all of his henchmen, so we got to take you downtown and figure this out. Like, it's really
It's
chilling. It's not a happy ending. It has
No.
all of this setup for the happy ending, but then it's just like pans out like, oh wait, we're done, what the fuck?
It's almost like, so I talked about it before, but like a day or so before I watched this, unrelated in every way, I had just watched Roman Holiday.
Hmm.
And if people out there haven't seen that movie ends in such a way where they're building up to what we think is going to happen, and then that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
And it's almost refreshing in both this and that movie, where like, oh, it's just a small twist on my expectations, because like it could have just ended with him and his cousin walking off into the sunset, camera, panning up,
Yeah.
but instead it's that ending, but he's got handcuffs on instead. Like, oh
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you had that actually through a lot of the 70s movies. If you think of a lot of your gritty New York crime films in that, you'd have our cop or whatever who, he busted out of jail because they were going to bust him, whatever, for the corrupt cops that arrested him or whatever. He goes out, annihilates a bunch of people, annihilates some corrupt police chief, and then he's standing there, cops are showing up, and you get the wide shot in the back, music, credits, and you're like, wait, did he get arrested? I mean, he killed the bad guy, but but is he going to, you know, and you had a number of those films, if you think back to it, to where they leave that ending a little more enigma, to where nowadays it's like, you know, Beverly Hills Cop ending, to where it's like, you know, you know he got away with it, or you know that everything is okay. You know, they end up one liner, and then that. So I mean, it's interesting in the 70s, and this is early 70s, obviously, but still that way you end it with an enigma of what did exactly happen to the guy you're supposed to be rooting for.
Well, and going back to that point about the kind of the adversity that has nothing to do with the film itself,
Yeah.
but the climate in which it was made, to Ross Bigley's
Mhm.
point, if they had not had that restriction about like we have to show the good guy getting arrested, then we probably would have wound up with something more uh, conventional. You know,
Mhm.
the people
That
walking
could
off
be,
in the
yeah.
sunset, and it's kind
Yeah.
of happy, but because of
And
this restriction, which maybe at the time they're like, oh, we got to tack this on or whatever.
yeah.
Us watching this movie, 40 plus years later or 50, I can't do math right now because I'm tired, but we're like, wow, this is a badass ending. Whereas the
Yeah.
people making it
And
might have been
it's
like, oh, this is compromise. We don't want to do this. But
yeah,
it
so
probably
like
works
We
it's
got to
out.
and
do it
it
this way.
that was probably
Mm.
conventional then
Yeah.
because it's what
Yeah.
they had to do. So it's interesting how time changes things. Like you said,
Mhm.
like it's a cool ending now, but it was probably like, oh God, why do we have to end it this way again?
Yeah. Mike, your final thought with the big boss.
Like I said, like I've been sitting here trying to like really put together my like when I started the show, I've been trying to
Mm.
put together my thoughts. I knew I liked it, but in which degree? But just as we've been talking, like I just started liking it more and more. And I definitely think it's a movie that the more I see it, it's just gonna just really raise up for me. Um, and yeah, like I said, I'm excited to see it in the original language.
Mhm.
And if I can give you a piece of advice, Ian, as you're exploring the world of Bruce Lee, when you eventually get to the first Bruce Lee movie that I ever saw, Way of the Dragon,
Mm.
that's an interesting one, and one that you should do everything in your power to watch the subtitled version, because so that movie actually takes place in Rome.
Mhm.
And you get to finally uh, see what happens when Bruce Lee fights Chuck
Chuck
Norris.
Norris,
Yeah.
yeah, in the Coliseum.
But
Oh.
yeah, in Way of the Dragon, there's a whole subplot about how he does not speak the same language as um, some of the people in charge there. So he has to like be threatening in a more using his body. But whenever it's dubbed all in English and everyone's speaking English, they all just seem like idiots because he's saying something to him and then be like, "Oh, what's he saying? I don't know." And he's just speaking in English, and then he just like postures, and it's really strange. And like even watching it, like when I was a kid, I'm like, when I didn't know like understand movies, I'm like, that's a weird choice. Find out later on, obviously, like, oh, that's not the intention.
Right.
It's supposed to be that he's speaking one language, Bruce Lee's speaking another, and they can't communicate with each other.
I'll have to check that out. I've written
Yeah.
it down.
Yeah, so if you have the capability, and if you do pick up that Criterion collection, you'll have that capability. Watch it subtitled if you can.
Nice.
Yeah.
Always, I would always highly recommend, especially.
My personal rule is I
language.
go based on whatever the native language is of the
Mhm.
lead character. The
Right.
reason I make that distinction is because there's a lot of Italian horror films where they cast American actors playing Americans. So it's like, well, you know, that makes sense then to listen to it with a dubbed track because this character is American.
Right.
So that's my personal rule. Whatever the native speaking language is of the lead character.
I like that.
I like that.
I'm going to
That's a
steal
good,
that.
That's a
Go
good,
for it.
good guideline.
Yeah,
And,
like for example, like Dario Argento's first movie, Bird with the Crystal Plumage. His lead
Mhm.
character is American vacationing in Rome,
right.
so it makes sense to watch it in English.
Yes. Excellent advice, Mr. Vyers. Thank you so much. And yeah, for me, I dug this film quite a bit. I love watching early works like this because you can see the start of what
Mhm.
the performer would develop later on as their style, kind of some of their signature stuff, and seeing who rips them off. I mean, we had the same thing when we did the 8 weeks of Alfred Hitchcock. We did 8 weeks of Alfred Hitchcock here on the podcast. Check it out, folks, on our channel. Scroll way back. It's in our hundreds, the episode. But we did 8 weeks of Hitchcock, and I tried to cover Hitchcock films we had not watched before. And you watch those films too, and you can see not only a style of Hitchcock come through all of his films, and it happened even when we watched The Vanishing Lady. You can see early stuff, to some of his nuances in that come through, but borrowed from. And if you watch The Big Boss, you're going to see a lot of things in here that you realize martial arts films would borrow from for ages. Even still maybe today a little bit, but definitely when the martial arts films started to make their craze in the US, and the films, they're more and more prevalent. You can see the influences that especially Bruce Lee had on martial arts films and how to approach them as far as your characters go. And you can see that early's in The Big Boss. So there you have it, folks. Thank you so much to Ross Bigley for wonderful bits of trivia. Much appreciate you tuning in. All of our live viewers, thank you so much. And now, as always, this is where I give my wonderful guests, the panel here, who are so kind enough to come on our show, the license to shill. So, Michael, please shill away. Floor is yours, sir.
So you can find me and all of my ramblings at the Shameless Picture Show, which is the podcast that I've been doing for 7 years. Just recently did an episode with a local Tromette and burlesque artist, Katie Cadaver. We did the Joe D'Amato film, Beyond the Darkness.
Nice.
And then the next episode coming out will be Once Upon a Time in America with Christopher Kaihaus of the Twist Juice Film Festival. And you can find my podcasts everywhere podcasts are from, or you can everywhere podcasts to listen to, whatever, or on the Cinepunks website, which is our host. It's CINEPUNX. I've also got a lot of screenings coming up for my short film. No soliciting, but I'll keep it short and just say come out to Ross Bigley's Milwaukee Short Film Festival. It's starting September 8th, and it's going to be September 8th and 9th, but I'm playing September 9th in the 5th block, so you should come out to that one.
There you go. And Ian Simmons, please, sir, a license to shill.
Well, I'm Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. Primarily, I'm on YouTube these days, so just look up Kicking the Seat on YouTube. Do interviews and movie reviews and roundtables and stuff, including this Wednesday, going to be doing a live stream at 8 p.m. Central, a new, hopefully, series kicking off called If You Like, You'll Love. And we're inaugurating the series with If You Like The Last Starfighter, you'll love Gran Turismo. So we'll see how that conversation goes. And they'll be on YouTube at 8 o'clock. Yeah, it was our friend and colleague Jeff York came up with it over a breakfast. And so we're testing it out. So it should be a lot of fun. And come join us.
Awesome stuff. Please check out other stuff, folks. And if you don't make it to Ross Bigley's Short Film Festival to catch Mike Vyer's short film, which I have seen, October 13th and 14th, Oshkosh. We have the Sawdust City Fright Fest. Yes, you will be hearing me plug this, folks, because we got a great couple days of indie horror, as well as Friday the 13th, Friday night. We're playing a short film, and then we're playing Friday the 13th. I think it is
part 2, I believe.
Part 2 is what they're playing there. And then the next day, we've got a whole lineup, mostly of Midwest, but not all, but mostly Midwest or Wisconsin produced horror, because that's our focus, is we want to bring focus to our wonderful state and the wonderful film community, not only here, but in the Midwest. That is farthest from it, probably could be from Hollywood, but it doesn't mean it isn't Hollywood-like. And so, yes, Mr. Vyer's movie will be playing at the Sawdust City Fright Fest, along with some wonderful features. We've got The Headmistress playing, which is produced here in Wisconsin. Actually, it was shot in some of my old stomping grounds. Check out my interview with the directors I did with them back in the springtime. And also Fang, a film produced and made by an individual from Chicago, south of the border, if you will. And it's a wonderful film starring Lynn Lowry in an interesting role. She kills it in that movie, as well as a whole bunch of other shorts, including Mike Byers. So 13th and 14th, Sawdust City Fright Fest. Hey, what better way to spend your October than watching some indie horror? And what better way than to listen into more podcasts? Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in and checking out our little sliver of the internet. Just to let you know, next month I do have a theme, but it's not cannibal theme. Ha ha. Ha, it would be easy to do a theme around the Green Infernal as cannibals. That's too easy. Little do I make things easy, usually for myself. So it'll be Flaming Fall. And Flaming Fall, we are covering four films with the word Inferno in them. But not Inferno, because we already did a Hot Van Dam special with Inferno, aka Desert Heat. But
what about Argento's Inferno?
Exactly, that is one of them that is on the list. Argento's Inferno is on the list, as well as the Green Inferno and a couple others, which you'll be able to check out the lineup later this week on specialmarkproductions.com for what movies we will be covering in September. So thank you so much, folks. And now we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Yeah.